case. All right, so I want to thank everybody for showing up today. Today we're going to talk about healing trauma through breath. So powerful practices for PTS recovery. My name is Jeremy Chimbert. I'm the owner and practitioner at Pacific Northwest Shamanic Healing. And with me today is Jeff Granvill from mindfulpresence.org, a nonprofit that helps mainly children right now, you would say, with breathing techniques and mindfulness practices.
Yeah, it really started out that way because of my son's journey through the pediatric environment. But since COVID started, I've opened it up to the general public. So the same, and I've always said this, if we can make these practices work in the pediatric environment, we can make them work anywhere,
Oh,
right?
I
Yeah.
definitely agree. And I wanted to talk briefly about, before we get started in your work, PTS and trauma in general. The way I look at it is there's three pillars to healing. There's the mind, there's the body, and then there's the spirit side. And when I say spirit, I don't necessarily mean you have to find a religion or you have to do the indigenous way of thinking or animism. It's more just finding a practice that works for you, whether it's connecting with your ancestors, your guides, or your angels, but knowing that there's something more out there than just this physical domain. And that's kind of how I talk about it when I mean spirit. And I also think that everybody can have trauma, but not everyone would have PTSD. You'll get PTSD from the trauma, but if you have PTSD, you automatically have trauma.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how I look at those two aspects. Would you differ in any way of that or agree?
No, it's a good way to look at it, Jeremy. And talk, first of all, let's talk about the mind body
Hmm.
trilogy, mind, body, spirit trilogy, right? And again, those are all human descriptions of the very same thing because I don't call it a mind and a body, I call it a mind body. It's like the brain is not held in the cranium, it's through every cell of the body. Consciousness is irreducible.
Yep.
So consciousness, spirit animates our physical body, and that includes our mind. And consciousness is a stream through the brain, which is the mind, and they're all intertwined. That's
Yep.
why it's so important to address all three. They're the pillars of healing because they are actually all together. The only time they're separated is when there is stress or trauma or something that makes us so 3D in our left brain of our fight or flight that we're here in the now trying to solve a problem in fight or flight. That's what makes the separation between our divinity and our egoic mind, our human body. And that separation is where trauma begins.
Agreed. And yet, I'd also caveat on the spirit part is our energetic field, so our own spirit. So
Yes,
not even necessarily having to believe in a higher power or anything, but it's also our own spirit, our own energetic field. Because
absolutely.
I find with trauma and PTSD, we have these events that happen to us, and then they cause these imprints within our energetic field, just like they do in the body or in the
Hmm.
mind. So you'll
Hmm.
have the memory of something in your mind, it's also a memory within your body. You'll get that tightness or the fight or flight experience, but then it's
Right.
also in your energetic field, which causes you to not heal as quickly. Or maybe you might start opening yourself up for sickness of some sort because your
Yeah,
body's
yeah.
trying to work on
Well,
it.
and I agree. If you take the mind, body, spirit trinity
Mhm.
that's actually one, it's the same thing, then an injury on one of them is an injury on all of them. I mean, it's like I say, people talk about emotional pain, emotional trauma versus physical trauma, pain, injury, whatever term you use. Well, every physical trauma is emotional, and every emotional trauma becomes physical. So an emotional trauma is held in the soma.
Yeah,
So you can't injure one without injuring all three.
agreed.
Yeah.
And so with your work, let's kind of focus on that part next with, I put you more in the mind pillar, but again, they're all connected. And you do a lot of breath work, which also relaxes the body and so forth. So how do you go about approaching somebody with PTSD or trauma through your work?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. A lot of times people are referred to me. When I was taking referrals from the Center for Healing Neurology here in Seattle, there would be people who have endured trauma and have PTSD. And there's several of them that are absolute shut-ins that have to sit in a dark room because even the light of day is too much tension, too much to send you over the edge. Um, so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll start out with conversation. And I often tell people that, we can talk about anything you'd like, but we don't have to excavate the past to clear
Mhm.
the future. We can heal in the now. We can heal right now. And what's required is for someone to feel safe, supported, and expansive. And once you feel safe that you're not going to be injured again and supported that whatever comes out is not going to be used against you. And then expansive is in that heart-centered, coherent state. And I use the heart math equipment. It's hardware and software that takes your heart rate and, more importantly, your heart rate variability, which is the biofeedback of your autonomic condition, your autonomic swing, which is balance, homeostasis. But if you're triggered,
I lost your audio.
hmm,
There you go. You're back now.
back now. I didn't change anything. That's sketchy. Okay. So, where was I? So
When
I
you're
use the heart.
triggered, then
Yeah, when you're triggered, you come out of balance. You're out of homeostasis. You're out of coherence between your mind and your heart, and that's biofeedback that shows your physiological state. And then the breathing exercises I do connect you with your heart. Like I was literally at the hospital one time in the elevator going down 5 floors, and I had that amount of time to talk to a specialist, a social worker who works in the heart transplant division for Seattle Children's Hospital. And I gave the actual elevator version. I said, okay, if this is what can help you most in the shortest amount of time, find your pulse on your wrist or in your neck or in your femoral artery in your hip. But if you can find your pulse,
mhm.
you breathe in your nose for 5 heartbeats and you breathe out of your mouth for 6 heartbeats, just lightly and gently. And you just connect your mind and your heart and you're counting your heartbeats. Breathe in for 5 heartbeats, breathe out for 6 heartbeats. And you'll notice when you do a few cycles that your heartbeat will speed up when you breathe in your nose, and it'll slow down really well when you concentrate on it, when you exhale, especially on 4, 5, and 6. Well, what you're doing is you're biophysically connecting your mind and your heart. You're using counting to occupy your left brain, your monkey mind of chatter. You keep it busy. And you're being expansive between your heart and your right brain, which is your connection to collective consciousness, divinity, God, whatever you believe. So being balanced between your heart and your mind, and then laterally, is what I call the physiology of your divinity. It is that balance that you're on. And when you are in that balance, that's when trauma can be released. If you are triggered, heavy to the ego, heavy to the fear, angst, anger, anything that gets you off center, your mind and your heart, like you lend your attention to whatever is distracting you, bothering you.
Mhm.
And like Rupert Spura says, it's literally the center of your universe that you are giving over to whatever you're focusing on, whatever's distracting you. Instead of you being a singularity right here in the middle and you have full agency of your body and your emotions and your presence, you've lent your consciousness to something else. You're letting your consciousness go. And in that situation, like when you're triggered, when there's fear, when there's PTSD, that's what's happening. Looping thoughts are the symptomology of all anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts. All of it come from looping thoughts. And that's a mechanism within the body for your survival. That's a mechanism. Like if you had to be at the opening of the cave to keep the fire going, to keep the wolves out, you want to keep thinking about it to stay awake. But once your shift is over and you're laying by the fire, you want to be able to rest and digest and sleep, right? So by having trauma, and there's two kinds, too much too soon and too little for too long, like too little understanding, too little care, too little, but too much too soon means that you are triggered into a hypervigilant state, and that becomes an imprint in your body. And like you say, in your energy field, because the mind, body, soul are inseparable. So, and this is a longer answer than you were hoping for.
Oh, no, this is
And
fine.
I
Keep
do
going.
because realizing this mechanism is the key. And I use the triad of transcendence of awareness, understanding, and adjustment. Because if you're not aware of something, how can you change it, right? And if you don't understand it, how can you make the proper adjustment to clear it in your life? So when we create what I call a state of receivership, when you can go to your heart and occupy your thoughts, be coherent in your body for just moments at a time, your body holds trauma, which causes triggering thoughts and PTSD. It holds the trauma in a somatic trauma imprint, is what I've coined it. And then my treatment for that is a somatic trauma imprint release. Okay, so that trauma is held there. And it's like taking an emotional snapshot from the level of consciousness that endured the trauma. Okay, and then you create an aspect of yourself to deal with that trauma. And that aspect has a different worldview than your original self was innocent and it didn't have to worry about people hurting them. So when you are traumatized like that and you create an aspect of yourself to deal with it, it suddenly realizes, holy crap, there's people out here that'll hurt me, right? And you have to become hyper vigilant. So you have a different worldview. You have a different blood chemistry. You have a different belief system. It's like the beginning of that separation is what ends up in split personalities and bipolarism. So this is the original trauma. And that's what Gabor Mate says in his book, The Myth of Normal, and Richard Schwartz and Internal Family Systems. They call it parts work, where
Yeah.
part of you is this way and part of you is that way, and you're rejoining them. So to me, it's like when you create an aspect of yourself to deal with trauma, and it's against the essence of your soul, it is who you truly are and who you have to be to deal with trauma are so far apart. That's the gap where trauma falls in, where illness starts. That's the separation. So your energetic, your heart system, your soul system is is literally fractured and damaged, which is what I love about what you do, right? Because I am, like I said, I'm all about energy and spirit and I walk it and live it and love it every part of my life. I breathe it in. But what I went through with my son at the hospital, it was like I had to research science to describe the miracles. I
Mhm.
had to give language to the miracles because I couldn't say, we had an out of body experience we created by doing breath work and rubbing, putting our foreheads together. We created a mind out of body. I couldn't say that. I had to come up with scientific jargon to speak their language so we could try it again next time. Right. So that's where I really learn. And I have been researching this for 10 years. I've been trying to describe these miracles for 10 years. Right. So I just gobble everything up and all of it leads to the middle. Everything that everybody writes and teaches and science and quantum physics and spirituality, all of it leads back to the core truths of who we are in this universe, why we're here. how we're built, why stress is a motivator to adapt our environment, right? If you have stress in your environment, you either need to adapt to your environment or adapt your environment to you. You have to relieve that friction, right? And stress is the motivator. So that's where it begins.
No, and I agree. And the part you mentioned too about part of you that leaves to protect itself, that's parts work where sometimes it's inner child work.
Yeah.
Maybe a part of you left that was a child and it's hiding deep within you and you have to bring it back to you. In the shamanic realm of things, we call that soul loss or power loss. So sometimes something happens to you, whether perceived or otherwise.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because to you it was traumatic enough for it to happen.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you can't compare what happened to you to somebody else. And that's where I got stuck when I was going through my own journey was, well, what happened to me was nowhere near bad as those guys, so I should be fine. But to me, it was bad enough to get me going.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah. And
then
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
and then these soul parts, they fragment off of us to go hide and protect itself. And then now we have to bring them back. And since we
Yes.
don't do this anymore as a culture or a society, we have multiple fragments of ourselves that have been gone for lifetimes. And you have people now who are just, they're going through these issues of like severe depression and they don't understand why because nothing happened, or severe anxiety, or sometimes they're just even too empathic because they're too open now because parts of them have left. And
Yeah.
so that brings on even more stress and trauma and other things keep happening. And so it's like you said, you got to work on the mind and the body, but then also closing the gaps of the energy field and just make a person whole again.
Yeah. Yeah. And that totally resonates with me as truth. And it's like the layer you just added to what I had said about, you create an aspect of yourself and it's protecting the aspect, that inner child that we maintain our entire life. We still are looking through the same eyes as that little child did, right? So, um, when I was talking about whatever you give your attention to, you're actually lending it your consciousness, right? Like if you are in traffic and you're in a hurry and you're triggered, and you miss a red light and you see the car still going and it's like, I should be up there with them. I should have made it through that red light. You're actually occupying that space with your consciousness. There's a gap between, you're not really fully in your car. I
Mm.
constantly teach people about mindful driving. It's the number one distraction. Not being mindful is the number one cause of accident and death in cars. You just do it more when you're drunk. You get distracted easier when you're drunk. But the main thing is being distracted. Okay. You're lending your attention somewhere else. And part of your soul goes with it because consciousness and soul and inner, they're all one. Truth and love and God and all these things are synonyms for the same thing. Is that when you lend your attention to something, part of your energy field and soul goes with it. And if you keep fragmented for too long, you are split. So parts work and like I call it aspect integration. When we're in trauma, we aspect generation. We generate aspects of ourselves, and then to parts work of putting it back together is aspect reintegration. You're reintegrating it back into the whole and realizing that, hey, that tough person, that sharp edge I created to deal with a bitter world, a dangerous world, I don't need to be that sharp anymore. I'm taking more agency of who I am in the world, and I'm bringing those parts back together. I'm reintegrating those aspects. The soul comes with it, the energy comes with it, because if part of you is you've created an aspect that's so polar opposite of who you truly are, and you get triggered into that aspect, you're fragmenting your spirit and soul, your energy, and everything is fragmented every time you're triggered and lend your conscious awareness to that worldview. You are, it's literal. You
Mhm.
are fragmented. So yeah, I
Yeah.
love the addition that you add to that.
Yeah, and that reintegration part's very important too, because A lot of times people are like, oh, I want to do a soul retrieval. It's like, yeah, but if you're not ready for it, it's not going to stay. You have
No.
to do the work first. And I'm in the same philosophy with you is I don't need you to relive it. I'm not asking you to relive it. We're not going to talk about it. We don't need to go through what happened and who did what or what you did or didn't do. We're clearing out those energetic imprints out of your field so you can reset.
Yeah.
And then now you can reset your triggers and how you react going forward. So
Yeah.
you always remember what happened. Unfortunately, that's just what it is, but it doesn't affect you in the same way.
Right.
You get to choose now, oh, that's not going to keep me up at night. The past is the past. It's what happened. It's sad or it's this. You're not getting stuck in the emotion. That's
Exactly.
one thing my
It's
teacher always says is have your feelings, don't get stuck in the emotions.
yeah, yeah. And that's the key because like emotional re-experiencing is about approaching the topic and not getting emotionally triggered. Every time you can approach it, because the truth is the brain doesn't know the difference between a story and a real event. If you're hearing the story again, the brain thinks it's happening, produces the blood chemistry it took to survive it. That's that emotional snapshot I'm talking about. That's the recipe of how I survived it. So in talk therapy, and they're reaccounting and going through the emotion and talking about it, you're now reinforcing that trauma with today's consciousness. And every time you talk about it, like they say, people who complain a lot, right? When you go out and you talk and complain and you use negativity, you're just living in that blood chemistry and reinforcing it all the time. And of course, you're at that frequency and you draw that back to you, all that, the secret of the law of attraction and all that. But um, so yeah, that's a really important part of it.
Yeah, and of course it's always easier to say than to do, but that's where I think your work is important too, because especially the breath work, that's a quick and easy way to reset.
Yeah. Yeah,
Anybody
it's
can do it.
it's actually I've been watching Huberman, the Huberman Lab
Mm.
about neuroscience, and he goes into all the stuff I love anyway. But they do a type of reset breathing a little different than the one I came up with. I came up with mine innately in the field, in the hospital. And then years later, I learned about emotional re-experiencing and different types of breath work because I'd never really done it before. But the reset breathing is the number one way, acknowledged by even Western medicine and academia, the number one way to shift the autonomic nervous system out of fight or flight trigger into balance and homeostasis, which is called resetting the autonomic tone, okay, resetting the autonomic nervous system, is this reset breathing. And once you do the reset breathing, it puts you back in a um, autonomic swing between fight or flight and rest and digest, sympathetic and parasympathetic. And when we're in homeostasis, that's the balance. Like heart math teaches it's like a tennis player waiting for a serve. You don't know which way you got to go, so you got to rock back and forth. And that's what your autonomic nervous system does. It just vacillates between fight or flight, rest and digest on a really low volume, really low amplitude, right? So it can just snap one way or the other. So when it's flipped over and stuck in fight or flight, that's when we're triggered into the aspects of ourselves. Our soul's divided. We're given energy to other things, everything we've just talked about. So this reset breathing, which jumpstarts the autonomic nervous system, the my second breathing technique is called the controlled breathing, where you count in the nose for 5 seconds and out the mouth for 6 seconds.
Mm.
And then you do 5 cycles of that and find your pulse on your wrist. And then you verify that your heartbeat is speeding up when you breathe in and slowing down when you breathe out. And you're biophysically wiring into your system a connection between your heart and your brain. So you close that gap, you're bringing yourself into the now. All aspects of yourself naturally return. And that's what I call sanctuary space. So when you can breathe your way to zero, you can get down to zero angst, all your aspects, you've made a mind-body connection, you biophysically validate it and wire it in with neuroplasticity, you can return to it quicker next time. So once you get the feeling and the biophysical validation of that sanctuary space, it's so much easier to tell everything that's not that, right? If you start, and I always say meditation's great, but what you're trying to do is meditate for an hour to cure the ills of the other 23, right? When in reality, when you can breathe your way to zero, breathe your way into balance and verify it and do it over and over again, then you leave the home that way. You get out of bed, do it in bed before you get up. You bring everything together. You take full agency. Because if part of you's triggered and you're thinking about work or you're thinking about the thing you have to do later, you're not there in the moment
Hmm.
waking up properly. You are triggered. So this is the way you bring it all back together by going to the heart. And then from there, you go out and if something you feel a feeling, because this is the very simple path. We feel a feeling, we sense it in our environment. The heart sends a message because the heart is precognitive up to 6 seconds, verified by heart math. It feels your surroundings. That's how a noise can enter your dream and be right on time, right? We've all had that sensation where you hear it, you think it's a gunshot in your dream, but it's just a door slamming. But it all happened in synchronized time. So your heart tells you something, you feel a feeling, and then you start having thoughts about it. And those thoughts, if dwelled on and given emotion to, become an emotion, right? So if you can have a feeling and let it, like they say, pass like a cloud in a blue sky, right? Just be the observer of that feeling. Don't let it sink in. Okay, so that's like ancient cultures. And then you've got Joe Bolte Taylor, a neuroscientist that wrote the book My Stroke of Insight. She has validated that if you have a feeling and you catch it, the biochemistry will pass in 90 seconds. But if you think about it and put heart energy into it, or worry, or dread, or fear, you're building that emotion, and that blood chemistry will last all day, from an hour to 2 hours to all day. So if you have two or three disruptive thoughts during the day, you're in a negative, unhealthy blood chemistry all day long. So the whole thing about the sanctuary space is that you're more apt to feel a feeling sooner and realize being mindful. That's the big thing about being mindful, is you're being mindful of your environment, every sensation, every noise, everything in the moment. And then you notice that feeling and then you breathe. If you find yourself triggered, you go back to the reset breathing and then you build back your controlled breathing and then go to your heart. But the key is if you feel it and you're in your sanctuary space and you've practiced the coherence breathing enough, you can just feel that feeling and go right to the heart and just take a breath in and count your heartbeat up and count your heartbeat down. And that's it. That is as simple as it gets. It's no cost. It takes the $400 equipment from HeartMath and literally sets it aside. And this is endorsed. I've got a beautiful endorsement by Bruce Cryer, the former CEO of HeartMath, who we've worked together before. And I've interviewed him and whatnot. But it is literally, so the reset breathing is the number one way to reset the autonomic nervous system. And then getting to the coherence breathing is the number one way to wire in that state of peace and being and create a space, like I call the state of receivership, to let trauma go and have your original code validated. You're reuniting because, I love the part of it. Like I go way off into you know, the part about like Thomas Verney, who wrote the book The Embodied Mind, proving that every cell in your body has memory, it's consciousness. When you have a somatic trauma imprint where that snapshot is held in the soma, right, and we guard it, he says it's body armored from consciousness. So it's like we have an original blueprint of our DNA, of our expression in the world, and it's epigenetically changed in the womb by our environment, our set and setting. But we have an original blueprint, and that's the true self. And when we create an aspect of ourself that's not that, it's not that original blueprint. It's being held as this is an epigenetic expression of who I am when I'm triggered from trauma, right? It's a whole different mindset, worldview, epigenetic expression, right? And a fragment of soul, right? But it's not who you truly are. So when we are aware of that and we can biohack our way back, we're reconnecting those parts of ourselves that have been fragmented.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. And it reminds me too, because it's interesting how you kind of discovered that on your own. In my teachings, we do something that's called a decoupling. So it's resetting the fight or flight. And with that, it's we basically put our right hand on our heart, our second hand on our left hand on our second chakra, and we sit with it till we start feeling the heartbeats. And when you do it enough, you can literally feel two different heartbeats. And the concept is the heart is your heartbeat, and the second chakra is the heartbeat of the earth. So it's a good grounding technique too. And the whole concept is you're box breathing. You're doing 4 in, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. And you just start with 4. Eventually you can work your way up to 5 and 6. And it's the same thing. It slows down your heart rate, slows down your breath, and eventually you'll feel the two heartbeats going in sync.
Mhm.
And it's almost like there's a click when it happens. So the person's heart will be going like super fast, and the bottom one will be going a nice steady beat, and you're just focused on making them match.
Hmm.
And then there's almost like a click, and you can feel this tension just release in the person on the table, and both heartbeats are the same.
Mhm.
And it's just resetting that the fight or flight and just doing that constantly and then teaching them how to do it.
Hmm.
And it does do the same thing where the first time you do it, it takes a while, but the more you do it, you can literally just take a deep breath in and breathe out, and it just kind of clicks it back into place.
Yeah. Yeah. You're having that um wiring of neuroplasticity, the muscle memory of returning to that sanctuary space. It's the same mechanism. Like I say, it's the same universal truth about how we're built and how we can reset. Because whether, and I admit, whether it's my way of breathing or your way of breathing or different cultures or whatever, the truth of it is that you're bringing yourself back to center. Your mind, your heart, and your body are now in alignment again. The one that's always one is only fragmented by the human windings or trauma or PTSD to where we say, oh, we need to create a mind body connection. No, we just to remove the blocks. We just need to remove the wedges we put in there by our trauma and our human windings. So I love that. And I've never experienced what you described about two different heart rhythms within the same body. Because
It takes time. The
Mhm.
persona who's never done it before, the more you just focus on it, you'll eventually start to feel it, but it does take time to practice it.
Right, right. I'll have to check into that. It has me curious.
Yeah, if you're working on somebody else, it's easier to feel from the back.
Mm,
So if you were on my table, for example, and I was working on you, I would have my hands underneath your back and I would feel it better that way.
hmm
So it's a lot easier to feel from behind than it is in the front, but just having that mindset of, match my heart with my second chakra while you're
hmm
breathing in and just having that intention, it all does the same thing, regardless if
Yeah,
you feel it.
yeah, yeah. I love that. And I know that we haven't met in person yet, but I know we are soon. And something tells me my Akashic future. I love these because I call them the deja vu moment of my Akashic future. It's like you get a little snapshot of something that's about to happen because, like, deja vu is like that happened to me before, but our Akashic future deja vu moments are like, hey, I know this is going to happen. So I'll be looking forward to experiencing that.
It works great. I would love to compare it with your breathing techniques because sometimes I'll have a client in who's so stressed out from so much trauma, and it might take a couple of sessions because you'll bring them down, they'll come back and they'll be a little bit higher. You'll bring them back down a little bit further, then they come back just a little bit, then you got to bring them down. And then eventually, they get to that steady state where they got that muscle memory. They
Yeah,
remember how to do it. And that's part of their homework too, is I'll send them home and be like, do this in the morning for 2 to 3 minutes.
yeah.
And then do this before you go to bed, 2 to 3 minutes, because that way you're releasing what happened during the day. And then if you are one of those people that have bad dreams and nightmares and stuff coming up, you'll release whatever happened that night.
Hmm.
So even if you don't remember it, your body's remembering it and
Yeah,
you're just
yeah.
letting it go at least twice a day.
Yeah. No,
And
that's a
it's,
really important part because your autonomic consciousness, your higher self, can't balance the day because, like Candace Pert taught me in her book Molecules of Emotion, that's what happens in REM sleep is you're balancing the hormonal discharge during the day. So that is a key part of what actually creates PTSD, um, is that when we are triggered, when we have to stay up late and be on guard, when we have to, be hyper vigilant, we don't get our circadian rhythm. We don't get our 3 sleep cycles a night 3 times. And when we're in REM, we're balancing out the day's hormonal. And when we don't get to, the body keeps score. So the deficiency just keeps growing and growing. So, and this is what the DTs are when alcoholics quit drinking, is all these hallucinations, is the body and the mind and the spirit trying to come back in alignment and keeps it because the body kept score of what it was lacking from not being able to dream. So think about being in the military and being on guard. I've heard cases where people were on 3 tours in Vietnam and don't ever remember sleeping because they had to be hyper vigilant the whole time. So that's what creates that hallucinogenic effect to PTSD, is the differential because the body, every minute that you weren't allowed to be in your circadian rhythm, the body kept score of that. And then when there's a trigger, it'll play part of that out. And it literally, there's a case where a guy was in solitary confinement the most ever, and he's in a um, dark deprivation chamber, really is what it is. And it would be like playing movies in his, it would like the eyes no longer can see. Your visual cortex is so overloaded with imagery, right? Because here's another factoid, but we produce 6 times more information from the visual cortex to the thalamus than the eyes do to the thalamus. And the thalamus is what regulates if this is a scary emotion. It's an agitation level, right? So if the thalamus is agitated, it's going to tell the hippocampus to make this an implicit memory where it implies. So it's not, I went to war on this date and then I came back and then I did this another mission and I came that me. It's like it happens too much too soon and not enough, not too little for too long, both. And then you store that as inescapable in your body. And that's what creates that gap. That's where that happens to, so then trauma has to play out. You have to let that trauma go. And that's where I said, like, emotional re-experiencing is a real thing where you can revisit it, but there's no charge. The emotional charge dissipates because there's no bad ending, right? That's the whole key to making your body feel safe so that it will release the trauma, because It's storing it on an overload. It's like there's too much too soon. I have to store this until I'm in a position to let it go. That's why a lot of parents will have remembrances of childhood traumas once they have kids because they're now in another role and they're in a different environment where they now feel safe and they reflect and out it comes. So it's just like I say, I love this part because it's just how we're built. It's why we are who we are in the universe, is to record all this and see how we respond. And that's what I love about the research because it's all, like you say, it's all common truths. It's you're reflecting on the exact same mechanisms that I am.
Yep.
It's just from a different perspective, a different, so I love merging them. That's the important part because we can be holistic and natural and healers, but if we're all fragmented, then Western medicine always going to have a leg up because they know their product is inferior and they have to lobby and cheat in order to keep a hold on humanity, right? So there's far more of us than there are of them.
Oh yeah, and I would be the first one to even say like, shamanic practices aren't the end all be all. There's other modalities out there that can easily mix with this type of work too. But in the end, it's all energy work. It's just a different way of
Yeah,
getting to it.
yeah,
Just like, you know, all breath work is essentially somewhat the same. It's doing the same thing. It's just a
yeah,
different way of doing it.
yeah,
And I think you said it even before we started recording, the Buddha was even talking about living in a holographic universe.
absolutely.
And,
Yeah,
all these people have been saying the same thing for thousands of years.
yeah,
This stuff works. It's
yeah,
finding what works best for you and making
exactly.
making a commitment to it and trying something different. If your breath work, for example, doesn't work for someone, but mine works better, that's fine, or vice versa.
Yeah,
It shouldn't matter. There should be
no,
no,
no.
ego
It's
attached to it.
the garden is supposed to be cooperative, not
Yep,
competitive, right?
exactly.
And that's what I mean about coming together on the truths is that if we say, my modality is different or better than your modality and it works for everybody, then we're never going to come together,
Yep.
right? And so that's what I love about finding the core truth about all these modalities. Every well-intended religious fragmentation started out with a core of who we are and how we're built and what it means to be a human with a soul. That's the root. That's the first sitting around the campfire looking at the stars, that type of conversation. So I love finding, coalescing all the truths from all different aspects everywhere I can learn. I mean, the circle of the books I have, the everything is I'm pulling out those nuggets that like, ooh, this is just like that, but it's said differently, but it's still a common truth. And like you say, um, some people like tuning forks and singing bowls, and some people like gongs. I don't really like gong therapy. It just doesn't, it agitates me for some reason. But singing bowls and tuning forks, I love them, right? So all modalities don't work for everybody. And that's why when we talk about the common truths of how we're built in the universe and why we're here, there's no argument there.
Yep.
It's all cooperation, man. Because the main thing is for us to be there in the moment with somebody. And you even touched on something I've been studying lately about co-regulation, is how my calm can become your calm, right? And you can lend your calm to somebody who's agitated, and it brings them down. Like you said, little by little, they'll return. And heart math calls that mutual coherence. There's all type of different terms. And it's funny because funny. Lisa Miller, PhD, she wrote the book The Awakened Brain. I caught her on a Know Thyself podcast with Andre. And she's amazing because they're studying with fMRI the neurocorrelates of the caregiver and the care recipient. And the care recipient, when agitated, has the brain waves of high beta of agitation. They're in high beta brain waves, and the caregiver is down in like lower alpha They're right on the edge of alpha and beta and, almost transitory. And when the two co-regulate, they pick it up with fMRI even beyond distance. I mean, in other rooms across town, whatever. When the cerebellum of the care recipient reaches high alpha, they have an aha moment and the two regulate together. They co-regulate. And the same neural correlates in the caregiver are now in the care recipient. It's the same, it's a new way of thinking. It's that aha moment when you give someone new information, when they feel stuck in fight or flight and their convergent focus on this is what I believe, this is my reaction, this is what's going to happen. And they get that aha moment where you open them up to a new possibility. That's what's happening in the brain, is that you're bringing the high beta frequency of the cerebellum down to high alpha, which just happens to be the Schumann resonance. So when you're outdoors and you're grounded and you're in the nature, you're naturally coming down to an aha moment. That's why, like what I love about here in Washington in the Pacific Northwest is every hike has a reward at the end, it has a happy ending, a vista view or a beach or something like that. And you get up and you have that aha moment, that like, wow, I'm really here in nature, and you're there, you're present in the moment. Time kind of slows down a little bit. There's all kinds of neuroscience about, geeky stuff about what happens in our body when that happens, but it's just how we're built. And that aha moment in nature brings us down to the Schumann resonance, and we release our tension because we're in a safe place. Our body, just like trauma waits to be in a safe place, in a supportive environment and expansive, that's the same exact thing we get in nature when we look at a puppy or a baby, or, we're in that right brain aha moment. So,
Nice.
yeah.
We're coming up on time actually. This went really quick.
Wow.
But I don't want to be remiss because and what you were mentioning about, working together in coalition, we are designing, or I have designed a 6-month program for people with PTSD or trauma, and you are actually going to be a part of that program. Within the second month, you'll be coming on and teaching people breath work and mindfulness exercises. And the idea is over this 6 months, you will have healing within the mind, body, and spirit. And I'm actually having someone else join too that's going to be doing a lot of somatic body work as well. Her name is Anna, and I'm going to try to get her on the live stream next week. But if you're interested in working with us, put a comment down below or DM me privately. If you just want to work with Jeff, that's fine too. I'm going to have his links in the comments. So maybe you don't want to touch some of the shamanic practices, that's okay too. Get the help and healing that you need wherever you can get it. That is one thing I'm always going to say. But I do think that the 6-month program, which will be a group program because building that community is important for this type of healing, but it will be a small program because of that. I don't want to have 40 people. It's going to be nice and intimate with like 10 to 15. I think that's the best path for group healing. And like Jeff and I mentioned earlier, we're not going to have you talk about things and relive your experiences. That's not what it's about. It's about connecting you with your guides, working with the elements, working on your mindfulness practices and your breath work, getting recentered, getting grounded, letting things go out of your body. And then at the end of it, it is bringing back those soul parts that have left because of whatever happened to you. And so it's a complete 6-month program that we've designed to help people with that. And so I do hope that people are interested. If not, and you think there's something better, or again, just want to work with Jeff, you know, please do what you need to do to make yourself better and to give yourself the help you need. That's really all we're looking for. I don't know if you
Beautiful.
wanted to add anything to that.
Oh, I would love to. I'd love to. I'm just busting at the seams. I'm honored to be a part of it. I'm doing it because I believe in it. And I believe it's a very well-rounded, thought out approach, heartfelt, spirit-guided approach. and whoever joins us will experience relief.
Yeah.
I have no doubt in my mind. If you are open to and curious about what's going on in the world, in your body, this is the place to show up and get that journey going. Because if you feel stuck, if you have looping thoughts, there are mechanisms that we can remove so that you can be free to be your whole self, your true self again,
Yep.
and live that life of freedom, which is what we all are here to do.
Yeah, and going with that, even though I have an outline of the program, it's really going to be defined as we work with the people within the program because there might not be a need to do one specific exercise because nobody needs that. It's not going to be a one size fit all. It's going to be a fit for the individuals that show up.
Yeah,
That's the one thing I want to make sure it's clear too. It's not a watch a couple videos and get back to me. It's no, this is going to be designed for the people who show up each time there's a round, because that is our hope that we continue doing this and just help more and more people, people who, like me, have been through some stuff. And like Jeff, I mean, the trauma you had with your own son, even though that had a happy ending, there was still trauma involved with that. And
still
so,
is.
yeah.
Yep. Yep. That's the way we're built. So we
Yep.
never forget and we survive. And
Right.
I really like that how you're speaking about the individuality of it because that's exactly how I show up to every care recipient I've ever been prescribed to. Is I love the term mu shin of no mind. I learned it from Alan Watts, the philosopher and teacher, and it's Chinese. It's Mushin is means of no mind, which is, not a good context in Western environment to be mindless, right? But of no mind means everything you've learned, everything you know, everything of your heart and soul comes with you, but you have no human agenda for an outcome so that you're better to respond to whatever comes at you. And this is the malleability that we're bringing to this course, small enough groups that we can individualize it for what the people need. And we have a complete array of tools at our disposal to help meet you where you are and help rein in those parts, those aspects, and reintegrate them.
Funny because in the shamanic side, we call that being the hollow bone.
Uh,
You're
love it.
completely open and you're completely empty. There's no attachments to the outcome. You work with what needs to be done in the moment. Whatever
Beautiful.
needs to come through is what comes through. We're completely hollow and we just let spirit work through us,
Yeah.
either the client or even ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I always go to like the ancient Hawaiian practice of
Mm.
Ho'oponopono, where they say if your cup is full of human windings, where is room for divinity? Where is room for the download of what to do in the moment? And I'm telling you, that happened over and over and over again through my son's journey, where I did not know, but I was in the moment with him and the download came, being balanced with the need, the like Hawkins says in consciousness, a human can't have a thought or a question unless the answer already exists in the quantum. No problem can exist unless there's already a solution in the quantum. The only gap is a human winding that keeps us away from it. So being that 0 point, going to zero like Ho'oponopono does, where, you bring to zero the agitation, the need for an outcome, and the solution and the problem just join together. It's
Mm.
just, we just get out of the way,
Yep.
just like healing. We just are
Yeah.
innately healthy. We just
I
need to get out of the way.
yeah, I tell people I don't heal anybody. All I do is remove blockages
Exactly.
and you do the rest. Your energy will do the rest. I'm not a healer. I'm a blockage removal.
Right.
But we just
Which,
use healing because that's what people want to say.
yeah, yeah. And that's another really good example to end on the commonality of everything that works for
Yep.
people has to focus on these truths. So whether it's my language, your language, different culture, different Hawaiian, Chinese, doesn't matter as long as the true core truth is there, the real truth. And we come to that. So
Perfect.
I'm excited for it.
All right. So again, if you're interested in joining us, it will start March 1st. Go ahead and leave a comment below or just reach out to me privately in the DMs. Not a problem. And I can send you more information on it. Otherwise, again, if you want to just work with Jeff directly, I'm going to have his email address in the comments so you can just reach out to him too. Again, no worries whatsoever. We're both here to just make sure people get help wherever you get it from. And if you just want more information in general, our conversation, maybe you're just more curious about shamanism and how it can help PTSD. I do have a private Facebook group that I will link in the comments of this too. And that's no obligation of anything. It's just I'm putting out information there to help people understand how shamanic practices can help. That's really all it's about.
Mhm.
So
Awesome.
sweet.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time, Jeff. This was great. And I hope people reach out to you and even more people join the program. I hope you
Yeah,
get,
I'm looking forward to it, Jeremy. Thank you. Good
yep.
connection. And I believe we have an appointment Friday.
Yep. Yep.
All right.
To meet the body worker.
Right on. Sounds good.
Me and I think it's ended. And hmm.